I envy these kids nowadays. That probably makes me sound like an old fart, but they really do have a lot more options than we did when we were their age. My youngest is neurodivergent, while my oldest has ADHD, which is bad enough to sometimes give him terrible anxiety. We have any number of things around the house to help with said anxiety. Poppets, fidget spinners, fidget cubes, sensory blankets, you name it, and we probably have it somewhere. My youngest son picked them up early, and they seemed to help him cope with the stress that his autism often brought on. My oldest scoffed at the gadgets my son had, but he left them lying around, and my oldest started playing with them too. Now he doesn't go anywhere without his fidget cube, and his hands seem glued to it around test time. All I had when I was his age was a worry stone, and I probably worried away more than a quarry of them. So when my youngest left his Karmagami on the living room floor one afternoon, my first exposure to it wasn't exactly positive. If you're unaware of what those are, they're these little revolving toys that have different patterns on each of the faces. As you rotate it, the picture changes, and the transitioning images are supposed to be soothing. That, however, was not my initial reaction to them. He had left it in the living room floor beside the couch, right in a blind spot. So as I came around the corner one day, wanting to get a little lunch from the kitchen, I stepped down on the pokey end of the toy. After a few minutes of cursing and hopping around, I was ashamed to see that I had broken my son's new favorite sensory toy. I looked at the time and realized I only had about an hour to find a new one before he came home and had a fit. Quick trip to Walmart and $10 bought me an exact copy, but before I could leave, one of them caught my eye. It was a galaxy scene, the stars and nebulas giving me a strange, serene feeling. I decided to buy one for myself, feeling a little silly for wanting a kid's toy, but getting over it pretty quickly. As I sat at my desk and flipped through the scenes of open space, I felt a serenity I hadn't known since I was very young. I have a certain amount of anxiety myself, and the weird rotating thing soothed me when it all became too much. My wife rolled her eyes at me a little, but I noticed she wasn't in any hurry to get rid of her fidget cube either. So it sat on my desk, and there it was well used and well loved. At least, until recently. I've been working on a book for the last couple of years, and it was finally beginning to come together. It was polished. The test readers I'd let have a look at it said they couldn't wait for the next chapter, and I was excited to get the final draft to my editor after so long. As I edited it, the little toy became the object most often at hand. I would turn it over and over without thinking about it, the galaxy spinning as my tale spun itself closer and closer to completion. I was turning it as I worked my way through the last fourth of the book, when something besides the swirl of the heavens caught my eye. I looked down, seeing the corner of the starry sky, and then I saw something on the face that was not the Galileo space probe or a black hole. It was eyes. I dropped the thing in surprise, but I had definitely seen a pair of bloodshot eyes. I could swear the veins had pulsed a little, the pupils staring at me, and I had been so startled by the intrusion that I picked my feet up into my chair like I thought it might bite me. I reached down after a few seconds of sitting like that, feeling silly, and when I picked it back up, I could see the familiar black hole and space probe among the bed of stars. I shook it off, thinking I'd just been working too hard. Started flipping the little toy in my hand again. As the words began to fall comfortably into place, I forgot about the eyes. I put it off as an optical illusion. It kept spinning and spinning, stopping only to make edits or change something here and there, and I didn't think about it again until later that night. I was talking with my editor on the phone, telling her about my progress and playing with the Karmagami, when it happened again. I figured I've got about 10 more chapters before I'm done with the third draft. I think then I might be ready to pass it to the proofreader, so we can make it ready for publication. The absent-minded flipping was cathartic, my hands busy as my mind whirled over the things I still needed to do. I had to finish the second draft, get the cover art finished, get the final page count, and as I thought about it, my fingers flicked the little toy around and around. The spacescape spun faster and faster, the stars practically winking as I talked to Edith about the upcoming book. I'd forgotten about the eyes, chalking it up to stress, and the little thing hadn't been far from my hand since. "That's great, kid. If they're anything like the last pages you sent me, I can't wait to see them. Did you fix the problem you've been having with the third part?" "Yeah, I think so. I changed it so Mark and Ted move away while he kills Taylor. But the little toy had nearly slipped through my sweaty fingers, and I looked down to see the eyes staring up at me again. They were boring into me, judging me as they glared daggers into my Notre Dame t-shirt. As I watched the eyes, something emerged from the lower lip of the device, and I yelped as something bit me. I dropped the Karmagami and the phone I was talking on, looking down at my bleeding thumb as I shuddered on the couch. My wife and youngest son looked over at me, not sure what had happened, and I heard Edith from the floor asking what was going on. I reached for the phone, but my hands were shaking as the bite on my thumb bled. I apologized for the surprise, but the rest of my answer was a little less excited. When I felt my thumb throb, I looked down to find that the thing was back in my hand. I wanted to drop it, but I just couldn't make my hand release it. The space scene was back again. The eyes and teeth were gone, but my hands shook a little as I flipped through the pictures. I spoke absent-mindedly to Edith, but my eyes kept flicking down to the little puzzle toy. I expected to see the eyes again, but when the call ended, I let the phone slide down to the cushions and took the Karmagami in both hands again. "Boy," my wife said, "you sure are interested in that thing tonight." I nodded, but I felt a little cold as I kept flipping. My fingers felt crampy as I spun the image, unable to stop myself, and it no longer brought me the peace of mind that it once had. This was more like the feeling I used the device to forget, and the longer I held it, the more it made the emotions in me circle like a tornado. I had eyes only for the changing colors and patterns, and as they scrolled, I saw the depths of space open up, and the eyes returned to judge me. They swirled like galaxies all their own, the white orbs climbing up out of the depths of the void. The veins pulsed in the pale pools, beating to the tune of their own phantom heartbeat. I wanted to stop, but I was powerless as I saw that Cheshire Cat's smile oozing up as well. The teeth grinned wetly, drawing up at the corners as they ogled me. The teeth groaned like trees in a high wind, the mouth becoming a rictus as it continued to grow. The closer it came, the faster my hands moved. My fingers cramped, but they still worked as a blurry mechanism, faster and faster, closer and closer, the eyes and mouth rising from the void as my movements seemed to summon them into the world. I couldn't tell if I was leaning in closer or they were getting bigger, but the longer I turned it, the more it encompassed my whole existence. When someone suddenly covered the object in my hand, taking it away from me in one smooth motion, I was both relieved and infuriated. I was in bed, completely unsure of how I'd gotten there, with my wife looking down on me with concern. "I think you've played with your toy enough for one night," she said, taking it over to my desk and setting it down. I smiled at her, a single tear sliding down my face, but inside, I wanted to jump up and throttle her. For the first time in my life, I wanted to hit her. I wanted to slam her head against the desk until she stopped moving, and then I wanted to pick up that toy and start moving the pieces again. I railed against the feelings, but they kept surging forward like eels just below the surface. She must have seen something when she looked back, because she paused before coming back to bed. Her look was strange, almost fearful, but she settled as I adjusted my face into something more normal. "What's gotten into you lately?" she asked, coming to bed as I pulled myself back to reality. "Just working too much lately," I stuttered, getting up as I got into my pajamas. Even as I got ready, I couldn't help but glance at the Karmagami. It was just sitting there, calling to me, begging to be touched, but I turned away as I went to lay next to my wife. The urge to hurt her had passed, and as we settled into bed, I felt like my old self again. I just needed a little distance from my favorite worry stone, and as I drifted off, I made a mental note to just let it sit there tomorrow. I closed my eyes and opened them in a dream void. I was floating naked in space, a long umbilicus sprouting from my navel. I was drifting, moving towards the last thing I expected to find out there. It got bigger the closer I floated, and I expected that it would suddenly burst open and reveal a bright flash of light. Maybe this was where the eyes came drifting from, though I'd certainly never seen it on the stickered background of my fidget toy. The door was massive, roughly 20 feet tall, and it only got bigger the closer I got. As it loomed up before me, I suddenly found myself not wanting to sit in that shadow. I didn't understand how it still had a shadow. Did things have shadows in space? I didn't know, but I didn't want to come anywhere near this thing, as little say as I seemed to have in the matter. It opened suddenly, as I had expected, bathing my eyes in star-dazzling light. As I shaded my eyes to see what was coming through, I saw those glittering teeth as they opened wide and came down loudly around me. I came awake with a deep gasp, finding only my sleeping wife in the dark room. It was still on the desk then, that hateful pyramid, but I don't believe it stayed there long. When I woke up the next morning, my fingers ached, and I was already spinning the galaxies in my hand. My arms were shaking from exertion, the eyes and mouth already growing as they threatened to break the bonds of the Karmagami. I threw it away before I could think better of it, and when it burst against the wall, my wife snorted before falling back asleep. I just sat there for a moment, hands extended, not sure where I'd found the nerve. It was the last thing I had wanted to do, but now that it was star-strewn pieces on the ground, I felt more at peace than I had in days. It couldn't haunt me anymore, couldn't make my fingers cramp, my head ache, but even as I slid back under the covers, I could feel my fingers wanting to work the puzzle yet again. When I woke up and found it sitting on the desk, right where my wife had left it, I almost cried. Over the next few days, the little thing was my obsession, despite my better judgment. If I was awake, the little puzzle was spinning, spinning, spinning in my hands. My pages were forgotten, my family ignored. I couldn't help it. My mind was consumed by nothing so much as freeing whatever was trapped inside this thing, even though I was truly terrified of it. I would come to the precipice, the eyes ready to pop free of the canvas which held them, only to drop it before the snapping teeth could bite me. I would resist its pull for a few minutes, an hour at the most, but then I'd come to and find it in my hand yet again. My wife stopped nagging me about it after the second day, just sighing disgustedly anytime she saw me fiddling with it. At some point, she left to take the kids to school, and they didn't come back. I was aware of them the same way I was aware that every 8 hours I needed to eat, but I don't think it truly registered as something to be worried about. The phone was ignored, sometimes my body functions as well, and before long I was simply sitting on the living room floor in my own filth, my fingers rustling the drapes a little, as they worked the picture at an eye-watering pace. I'm in one of my little breaks now, the device thrown against the wall as I try to resist the urge to use it. I took the time to get this down, hoping it would find someone, anyone who might be having a similar problem. Sometimes the things that bring us joy are also the thing that destroys us. I don't know what sort of otherworldly being resides in this hunk of plastic and adhesive pictures, but it gets closer and closer to being born every time I pick the Karmagami up. For your own sake, if you ever see the eyes, don't fall into the same trap that has me. If you see the eyes, throw it away and forget it by any means possible. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. If you haven't already, I always suggest hit that subscribe button. Maybe go ahead and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the great stories that we do here. I've got a link below to my latest book if you'd like to pick up your own copy. Follow the link below down to Amazon, and if you'd prefer a signed one, get up with me. I'm sure we can work something out. If you'd like to support the show in a more monetary way, might I suggest heading on down to Patreon. We have several tiers. I'm sure you'll find something that'll suit you. I always recommend my $10 tier, which is my Ghostly Reader tier. You get a signed copy of my book on your doorstep anytime I write one, which is, on average, about twice a year. Speaking of my awesome patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor, and thanks to Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Jennifer Damron, and Tyler Parker for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.